Hey guys, Steve here at SKS Props. Today we're going to make a D&D plane mat. Welcome to the shop. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I'm coming back with lots more tips and tricks for prop and costume fabrication. But, much like my last video, we're switching things up a little bit. I have wanted to do some gaming stuff for a while, so in my last video I showed you how to make a super simple dice tower all out of my HD foam, which of course I'll have links over to that video if you want to check it out. This is another project that I've had on the back burners for quite some time, and it's a D&D battle mat. Now, this is the kind of thing that I wanted to be really modular and really light. So I actually made this out of my 10mm HD foam, which you guys, of course, can find over at Blick Art Materials. Now, with this setup, it is all based off of a 1-inch grid system, much like many of the D&D campaigns recommend. All of the walls and the buildings in this setup here are all made out of raw 10mm HD foam, which is really nice because I can throw these things together pretty quick, and then I can set up pretty much any room that I need for a D&D campaign. Like I said, a lot of these walls are cut into just 1-inch strips with a lot of bevels on the ends of them, so that way I can set up something and have a visual representation for what's going on in that area, including elevated areas and towers. So I want to show you guys the steps that it takes to put together your own battle mat. We got a lot to do, so let's get started. The first thing I do is go through my foam scraps and pick out a piece of 10mm HD foam. Now I'd like my plane mat to be 2 foot by 3 foot, and my HD foam is already 2 feet wide, so I just need to cut off the excess to make it 3 feet in length. Once I square it up, I use a metal straight edge as a guide, allowing my utility knife to go all the way through the foam into my cutting surface. I mark the foam in 1-inch increments with a pencil, and then using a T-square I try to make sure that the lines are as straight as possible. After one side has been completed, I then rotate the foam and continue my 1-inch grid pattern. This 1-inch grid pattern is extremely helpful in determining battle and movement in a variety of tabletop games. Using an extremely sharp scalpel and a metal straight edge, I follow all the lines that I had previously made, cutting about halfway through the 10mm HD foam. I started off on the short side of the board, and this process did take quite a while. You really want to be careful because if the blade strays even a little bit, when we do the heat technique later on, it's going to be very visible. After the cuts on the short side have been complete, I then rotated the mat and started working on the longer cuts. Now, to make sure that I had maintained a pressure on this but did not cut all the way through the mat, I cut them about halfway, rotated the mat, and cut through the other half. And in this picture you can see how all the intersecting lines create our 1-inch grid pattern. Now, to make all these lines open up, this is just a larger example of our score and heat technique. Just like any time we're doing this technique, you want to do it in a well-ventilated area, and you always want to make sure to have your respirator. Now, this heat process is going to take a while. You want to make sure that you move very slow and very methodical. I start in one corner of the plane mat and slowly and deliberately start to work my way out. It's very important that you keep the heat gun constantly moving so you do not burn or scorch the surface, but you want to apply enough heat that these score marks start to open up. In the end, you can see how having lines scored as straight as possible is crucial for this effect. As with most things in the prop world, it just looks too perfect. So, I'm going to do the tinfoil technique over this entire surface, which of course we've done before on numerous props. For those that are new to this process, you ball up some tinfoil, reheat the surface, and then press the foil into the heated foam. This will give it an embossed texture. The first pass of this is done pretty deliberately and pressed very hard, and that's because when we apply additional heat to it, some of this foam will bounce back. As a second pass, I flatten out the tinfoil a little bit more, so that way we have more surface area covered. When you have a light hitting the foam from above, you can really see how that texture pops. While I have my respirator and heat gun out, I go ahead and seal the back of the foam. Now that the foam is cooled and all the textures are locked into place, it's time to start thinking about priming and painting the surface. Because this plane mat is going to get a little bit of wear and tear, I've decided to go ahead and go with a Flex Bond and paint application like I've done to some of my props. So I decided to use Utrecht brand Mars Black as my acrylic base, and I mix that in with some Flex Bond. This mixture is applied generously to the surface using a mop brush and quite a bit of water. I'm trying to make sure that all this paint and pigment gets down into all of the grooves that we've made. If your mixture on the plane mat is a little too thick, go ahead and add water directly to it. This will help move the paint around. As I'm moving around the mat, adding paint and flex bond to more places, I'm adding either more or less of the black paint. This is going to give it a varied texture overall. Once a decent amount of the flex bond and paint has been applied to the playing mat, I then go in with a wet paper towel and start to dab up the surface. This will do two things. Number one, it will get rid of some of the additional paint that we don't need. Number two, it'll start to give us a really cool texture. You'll notice again that by using more or less of that Mars black paint mixed in with the flex bond, you can really get some variations in the dark hues. For instance, on this side of the mat, you'll see that it's very dark in the corners, and I didn't add near as much of the black pigment into the middle surface so that I've got a lighter area there. And here the wet paper towel is still used to simulate our stone texture. After about 10 minutes, most of the playing mat is dry, but there are pockets that are still a little wet, so I go in with a dry paper towel and I absorb the excess moisture. The last step of this project is to take a liner brush and a little bit of the thinned down Mars Black and fill in any of the grout lines that need to be darkened.
So you guys can see the steps that it takes to put together a super simple D&D battle mat, made it all out of my 10mm HD foam, which of course you guys can find over at Blick Art Materials. Now if you guys are building any of my builds or using HD foam, be sure to tag me on Twitter and Instagram at SKSProps because I love seeing your progress. Now hopefully you guys are enjoying these videos, and if you are, give them a thumbs up and be sure to share them with your friends and family. Now this is the kind of project that you could easily do in an afternoon, but it will add that much more detail to your next D&D campaign. I am personally one of these types of guys that loves having miniatures. I love seeing where everything is at. Even if it's as simple as just having some 10mm basic foam walls in here, it still gives everyone the representation of what's going on. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much again for your continued support. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.